Hello and welcome back to another Rush Duel Links video. Today what I thought we'd do is update our tier list, but this tier list is going to be a little bit strange because we have had new skill changes announced but they haven't gone live yet. What that means is all the community tournaments try to implement those changes as best they can. So what that means is Psychic has been banned from pretty much every single community tournament, so we're going to take that off the list for now. The Gaia skill has been, again, pretty much banned from all of these tournaments, so we're going to be taking all of these Gaia decks off of the list, which does leave us in a bit of a weird spot. So Dragon is also getting some changes, but because the changes Dragon is getting are budgeable, right, we can just only search the Dragon once, and we can just only search the Fusion once, and then if you do more than that, you'll get like a DQ. It is still legal, but you have to play it, again, the way that the changes have made it. So overall, the tier list looks a bit weird now, right? All of the best decks are kind of gone. Dragon's kind of on its own at top, but Dragon is also getting a nerf. And some of these other decks will be either stronger or weaker because of this. Some of those stronger decks were kind of hamstringing some of these lower tier decks, which has prevented them from coming into the meta. There have been obviously some new cards as well. We did get the new box that introduced additional support for the Worms and Cyburst decks. And we did just get a new skill and new card for Dark Galaxy, which has also given that deck a little bit of extra life. So at the end of this, we will talk about the skills that are banned and where we think those are going to end up. But for now, we're going to be making the list without those in mind. And this meta has actually been really, really cool. If we go take a look at the results. So these tournaments are specifically after Infinite Grand Crush came out, and also after tournaments started implementing the changes to the skills, which means there will not be any Gaia in these tournaments. So basically, we're seeing Elemental Heroes got 3 tournament wins. Fantastic. It's great to see that deck doing well again. Red Boot hasn't got any tournament wins, but has been doing really well. Worm Fusion, again, 2 tournament wins. So already we're starting to see the meta is very, very diverse and very different to what it was previously. Machine Good Stuff has a tournament win, Dark Galaxy has a tournament win, and then we start getting to like Dragon Fusion, Santa Mill has made a bit of a comeback, and some of the other decks have fallen down. So if we go and take a look at the pie chart, we can kind of see a visual representation of what this looks like. And this is a really healthy looking pie chart. We want as many decks on here as possible, and we want the slices on the pie to be as close to each other as possible. That basically means we have a very healthy and a very diverse format. So Elemental Heroes is definitely the standout as having the most points and being the most dominant deck right now, but it's not overly dominant, right? It definitely is the best deck statistically, but Red Boot is not far behind, Worm is not far behind, Machine Good Stuff, Dark Galaxy, Dragon Fusion, Santa, and the Matarion has a little tiny slice, but there are some other decks just below as well. So this is actually a really, really interesting meta, and actually really, really fun to play. So playing in tournaments right now, really, really cool. But first things first, Elemental Hero. So Elemental Hero, almost certainly tier 1 deck right now. Elemental Hero is reasonably powerful. It's been decent ever since Burst Wingman came out. The issue was it was drastically overshadowed by Gaia Matarion. Gaia Matarion has an automatic kind of win into this deck because you get to make Assura Star for free. Assura Star just absorbs the attack of all the warrior monsters, and guess what? All your heroes are warrior monsters. As well as the fact that Matarion Assura Star is kind of just better than Burst Wingman in a lot of ways. You can use it to pop monsters, or you can use it to pop back row, and you do have that absorption effect as well, which is really, really nice. But with Matarion kind of falling out of favor, because Matarion can no longer use the Chivalrous Celerity skill, it means that warrior-focused decks can really thrive. And again, the Elemental Hero deck is reasonably strong. Burst Wingman is a fantastic boss monster. The deck can comfortably play 3 copies of Talismanic Seal Array, which also means Flame Wingman is very, very powerful in this list. It's very versatile. You don't brick very often with it because you're not really playing that many high-level monsters. It's just all around a fantastic deck. It hasn't really got any horrendous matchups as well, which does make it really, really good. So next up, we do have Red Boot, and Red Boot hasn't got any tournament wins, but has been doing quite well. For me personally, I think Red Boot is actually going to be a tier 2 deck. Red Boot is a reasonably strong deck, but I don't think it has quite the same amount of teeth or power that some of the other decks have right now. I still think this is a tier 2 deck, which is still a fantastic spot to be in. I just don't think it's as good as the hero list. Being able to use Red Boot to burn your opponent and gain a load of attack is obviously really, really good. The skill is also really, really nice for this deck, and players have started playing Dragonic Pressure in the deck to kind of blow up the field and then be able to get out a boss monster, maybe something else on top, and get in for some good direct damage. So the deck is actually really, really good right now. It's Again, it's one of those decks that's kind of a good all-rounder. It doesn't necessarily have any like super bad matchups. Don't get me wrong, it's not massively favored into all the matchups, but I feel like at worst it's like a 50-50. I mean, sometimes you might get stuck running into like a maximum, but a lot of decks will unless you have something like a TSA. So that's kind of the one issue with this deck, but the deck does, again, like we say, play Dragonic Pressure, which will get rid of those maximums. So even that isn't the end of the world. Overall, I think it is a solid tier 2 deck, and I'm looking forward to seeing what it can do in the future. Next up, Worm Fusion, and this deck does actually have 2 tournament wins. I think Worm Fusion has a fantastic foundation, and it's another one of those decks that feels all around pretty strong. I'm actually going to put this into tier 1 ahead of Red Boot. I think having those tournament wins do give it that little bit of an edge, as well as the deck feels very comfortable to play. The only real weaknesses the deck has is, one, you can struggle to get over a maximum, but players have started playing things like TSA, some people have been experimenting with Tribute to the Doomed to make up for those weaknesses. The only other issue the deck tends to have is that it can get a bit awkward to find both the fusion material and the fusion and the field spell to do everything the deck wants to do, when the skill only lets you get one of those things. So it can be a little bit awkward, but outside of that, it's still absolutely fantastic. Gantry and Dragline were fantastic additions to this deck, and this deck is easily able to make a board of 3 really strong monsters, or just go into the fusion and pop 2 monsters out of the way, which is fantastic. Next up, we have Machine Good Stuff, and this list has been doing really, really well. I would say this comfortably is going to scoot on into tier 2. So Machine Good Stuff, this is basically your Mirror Innovator Jointech Rex machine pile, but players have started using the skill Elemental Double Extraction to basically send 2 copies of Strange Cat to your graveyard immediately, which then lets you summon out Mr. Alchemy, whose effect will then put one of those cats back to your hands, that's a +1, and then let you draw a card on top, which is a +2, which is absolutely fantastic. Getting a free +2 is so good, especially in a deck like this that basically wants to have lots and lots of tribute monsters, summon them very easily, and getting a free +2 gets your bosses out very easily. This deck's really good at popping back row, it's really good at getting piercing, it's really good at getting a ton of attack points, because again, we are playing as innovators, so we're able to just get these massive monsters. And the deck kind of does a little bit of everything. That's kind of why it's a good stuff list. It's got a bunch of really good generic cards that do just come together to make a really strong pile deck, and overall, I would say this is definitely a tier 2 deck. So next up, we have Dark Galaxy, and Dark Galaxy is not that far behind Machine Good Stuff realistically, so I think it makes sense to also pop this into tier 2. Overall, I would say Dark Galaxy is... We did just make a video about it, and I do think it is a little bit high roll, but assuming you just don't get unlucky, the deck is really powerful. Being able to summon out multiple bosses in a single turn, ideally give at least 2 bosses piercing in the same turn, you can just OTK your opponent or get in for a ridiculous amount of damage. The deck also is able to get a free plus from the skill every single turn, depending on what you mill, but it can be really powerful. I think realistically, with the heavy hitter in the Gaia decks really getting taken out of the meta because the skill has been banned, and the skill has been heavily nerfed as well, so it might not come back into the meta in a big way, it has allowed these slightly weaker decks to come back into the meta in a pretty big way, and we are seeing that with this massive shakeup. Overall, I would say Dark Galaxy can be a bit bricky, but can just work. If you just don't brick, if you just draw correctly, the deck is really powerful, and I think it deserves to be in tier 2. Next up, we have Dragon Fusion, and again, no tournament wins, but its points are very similar to Dark Galaxy. Overall, I would say this is probably going to be going somewhere around here. I think it is still a little bit better than Dark Galaxy, and Dragon Fusion is a bit of a weird deck where it has some fantastic matchups. It has a couple of matchups where it's realistically not going to be losing, but it does also have some matchups that can be a little bit awkward. One of the strengths of the deck is that you can play it very defensively until you're ready to destroy your opponent. Now, either that comes in the form of you just drawing all the combo pieces you need, or that comes in the form of your opponent leaving attack position big monsters. Then we get our skill, we can search both the cards we need and go into a fusion play and try to kill our opponent. Now, the deck is notably weaker because we can only search fusion once now, which means the deck's grind game is going to be a little bit weaker. Now, the ceiling of the deck is basically untouched. You can still do exactly the same as before. You still get that free +2. You could use things like Triad Drago or Star Replacer, get an extra +2, so you can get like +4, +5 in a single turn. Summon out your Mirror Gear Star, reduce the attack of all your opponent's monsters, attack, get in that direct attack. You can also still go into Drag Gear Star. The deck is still really powerful, and it still can be really frustrating to play against, but like we say, the deck has had its teeth chipped a little bit because it no longer has that grind game. If your opponent just has a good trap card to stop you, so they have a legend trap, for example, during the turn you do your skill and you get your double search, well, that can just kind of end all momentum that you had. So I think this deck is notably weaker than it was, but it's still very, very powerful. It still has some really, really strong matchups into a lot of the other decks around here, such as Dark Galaxy, such as the Worm deck, and it also is pretty good into the RB Drive. So overall, I would say still a tier 2 deck, but notably weaker than it was before. Next up, we have Santa Mill, and Santa Mill is a deck we have not seen in a while. Now again, Santa Mill has gotten a few new tools. We do have things like the Join Tech Raptor, which does give us a little bit of extra milling. We do now also have 3 copies of Santa, which does make this deck a lot stronger. I'm going to put this into tier 3. This deck has been performing. It did get a top 2 finish. It has had a top 4 finish as well. Overall, I would say there are a lot of bad matchups for this deck. It's not very good into maximums, for example. If your opponent is able to keep recycling cards back into their deck, such as Red Boot or such as the Machine Good stuff, this deck's going to have a hard time milling them out because they're constantly refilling their deck. But the deck still can win. It has some really favorable matchups, and I think it would be remiss to not include it on this list, so definitely a tier 3 deck. Next up, we have Matarion, and Matarion, we were kind of hoping this deck would kind of go away, but it seems to be around for the long haul. So this is definitely going to be another tier 3 deck. Now, this deck is naturally weaker, right? Even when people were playing pure Matarion, they were using Chivalrous Celerity. We can no longer do that. So we're back to using the old skill, which is Matarion Script. But because the speed of the game has drastically slowed down because Gaia is no longer in the meta, it means a slower deck like Matarion can come back into it. Now, Type Change Beam is newly limited 1, so it's naturally going to be a lot weaker than it was, but it's still very, very strong, and it does have some really good matchups into the above decks. For example, Warriors in the hero deck, Matarion Assura Star just gets to absorb their attack. Dragons in 2 of the other decks in Dragon Fusion and the Red Boot. Again, we can use our Victor Star to pop both of those, so this still does have some really good matchups. Anytime your opponent's going to leave a bunch of monsters face up, they still could get Type Change Beam Assura Star, and guess what? This deck does that, this deck does that, this deck tends to do that, this deck can do that, this deck does that, a lot of decks do that. So even though Matarion has been weakened drastically, it's still going to be around in the meta realistically, and it did recently actually get a topping performance. Next up, we have Chemicalized, and Chemicalized has been getting top 8s, but has not really seen anything in the vein of a top 4. So Chemicalized for me is actually going to drop down into High Rogue. Realistically, High Rogue is not necessarily going to be topping, but definitely could top if it got really, really lucky. We're expecting a High Rogue to be able to win a tournament because Rush does have a lot of variance, so that is the chance that that does happen. Overall, Chemicalized has lost its strongest matchup because its strongest matchup was really Gaia Matarion. We did start to see Chemicalized come out as a specific deterrent to that deck, and it was, like we say, its strongest matchup. Now, it still does have some okay matchups, but overall this deck still lacks the ability to get through set 3 monsters, which means if your deck is a, let's say, a combo-oriented deck, we can just stall out until we draw all of our combo pieces and kill them because they can't apply any pressure. So this is just one of those situations where not being able to have anything to beat set 3 is really, really letting the deck down. So for now, Chemicalized down to High Rogue. And now we'll talk about some of the other decks that have newly come back. The first one being Beyond Curiosity. Beyond Curiosity for us is going to go to High Rogue. This has won a tournament, but that was in the previous meta. This deck has shown that it can be a contender, but it can also be a little bit inconsistent. So if anyone doesn't know, the skill has been changed so it no longer reduces the attack of your maximum monster at the end of each of your turns. So overall, that means you get to just turbo out your max. If your max sticks, you're fantastic. If your max doesn't stick, well, you probably just lose. So this deck, again, can feel a little bit high roll, but overall still reasonably strong. The other deck we're going to be talking about is going to be the other Cyburst deck. This is specifically Maximum Ragnarok. Now, we haven't really seen this skill do much of anything just yet. I think there's still potential that this skill does get to do something, but until we do see it really thrive, we're going to have this in Rogue. So again, the skill did get changed so that now we can add 1500 plus defense monsters, which is nice. That means we can get back the new Brusselin card and we can get back the Cycliptron. Brusselin's also really nice because we can use the skill Maximum Ragnarok to put a Cyburst monster on top of our deck. Then we can activate Brusselin, mill the card, going to be a Cyburst because we put it there, and then if your opponent's 3 face-up monsters, we can grab all 3 max pieces back to our hand and get a free Maximum, which is really strong. Unfortunately, it hasn't really found its foothold in the meta just yet. And realistically, I don't know if it's going to. I think there is still, like we say, potential that this deck could pop off and we could start seeing it showing up in a big way. But as for now, it hasn't really managed to do so. So the last deck to talk about is going to be things like the Spellcaster Fusion. This deck has seen some experimentation and has seen mixed results. It has done okay. It hasn't done anything too crazy, but it has been performing reasonably well. We haven't seen Overlord in a little while, but when it did start seeing some experimentation, it was getting some tops, so we'll leave it in the Rogue for now. And Light Galaxy is a deck that's always around. People always tend to enter with Light Galaxy decks. And I think overall, the deck still has teeth, can be really, really strong or really, really weak depending on the matchup, and it can be very volatile because of that. So last but not least, I guess we will talk about the other decks. So first off, this is the complete tier list for tournaments right now because those decks are banned, but we are expecting Gaia to come back. Now, I would expect Gaia to probably be a low tier 3 deck. I think the nerfs that it got were a little bit too heavy-handed, and I don't expect it to be a big top performer. This could even be as low as High Road. That's my prediction until we actually get to play with the new skill and actually see how it feels. This is all just going to be conjecture, but overall, I think low tier 3 feels about right. We will not be seeing the return of Gaia Hero or Gaia Matarion because the skill has been changed, so we cannot do that anymore. But the other deck that could come back is going to be Psychic, and I think Psychic is probably going to shoot straight into tier 1. Psychic did technically get a nerf, but it's not a huge nerf. It still could be huge depending on what you draw, but overall, I don't think it is a drastic change. Now, don't get me wrong, it is notably going to be weaker, but overall, I think comparatively to what the other decks got, Psychic probably got hit the least, and so I think it's still going to be a very, very powerful deck, and I would be shocked if this was not still a tier 1. But this is the list. I think I am fine with all the placements here. I think this is how I see the meta currently. But is there anything you would change? Is there anything you would move up, anything you would move down, things that you think are in completely the wrong spot? Please let me know in the comments down below. But thank you for watching the video, and I'll see you next time.